The fatal mistake. The galaxy had seen countless wars. Empires had risen. Civilizations had burned. But through it all, one truth remained. Some species were meant to rule, and others were meant to kneel. The Zaurek Dominion believed this more than anyone. For centuries, they had crushed lesser species beneath their boots, erasing entire civilizations without hesitation. They saw themselves as unstoppable, untouchable, and when they turned their gaze to Earth, they did not see a threat. They saw a weak, fragile species. Humans had no advanced fleets, no planetary defenses strong enough to resist them. They had only been in space for a short time, still learning to walk among the stars. To the Zaurek, humanity was just another primitive species waiting to be conquered. They expected a short war, an easy victory. They were wrong, because the moment the first Zaurek warships entered human space, something became terrifyingly clear. Humans do not fight like other species. They do not beg. They do not surrender. They do not die quietly. The first battle was a massacre, but not the way the Zaurek expected. They had thought they would break humanity. Instead, they had awoken something else, something relentless, something that does not stop, something that, once unleashed, would never go back into the cage. The Zaurek came to conquer. Instead, they started a war that would haunt the galaxy for generations. Before going forward, please subscribe to HFY Aliens Battle, because this is the story of how the Zaurek Dominion made the greatest mistake in galactic history. They thought humans were weak, until they learned the truth. And by then, it was already too late. The underestimation, a war they thought would be easy. The Zaurek Dominion had crushed entire civilizations before. They had wiped out species that had stood for thousands of years, reducing their worlds to nothing but ash and memories. They had broken empires that were far more advanced than humanity. To them, Earth was nothing more than another stepping stone, a small, defenseless world, a species barely out of its infancy, a people who had never faced a true galactic war. The Zaurek generals gathered in their war rooms, confident. This will not take long, one of them sneered. They will kneel within weeks, another said, waving a clawed hand dismissively. And the Galactic Council? They did nothing. They had seen what happened when the Zaurek set their sights on a world. They had seen the broken remains of species that had tried to resist. The Council believed Earth was doomed. They expected surrender. The first fleet of the Zaurek Armada was dispatched to human space. Thousands of warships, carrying legions of soldiers, plasma bombardment weapons, planetary assault teams. It was over before it even began, or so they thought. The first human colonies fell with no response. Not a single plea for mercy. Not a single attempt at diplomacy. Just silence. The Zaurek took this as confirmation. They are broken already. They are weak. They know they have no chance. They laughed. They celebrated. They never considered what that silence truly meant. That was not submission. It was calculation. Because the humans weren't surrendering. They were watching. They were learning. They were waiting. And when the Zaurek realized their mistake, it was far too late. The first mistake, the war begins. The Zaurek Dominion had conquered dozens of species. They had seen every possible response to invasion. Some fought bravely but foolishly. Some tried to negotiate. Most simply collapsed. They had assumed humanity would be no different. They were wrong. The first real battle happened on Hesperia Prime, one of humanity's outermost colonies. The Zaurek expected a quick victory. Overwhelming force, planetary bombardments, and immediate surrender. Instead, they found something else. They found silence. When their forces landed, they found the human cities abandoned, but not empty. Buildings had been stripped, vehicles destroyed, every possible resource taken. The humans had already been here, and they had taken everything they needed. The Zaurek pushed forward, expecting some kind of desperate last stand. Instead, the first explosions ripped through their ranks. A Zaurek captain barely had time to react before his troops were cut down in a hail of fire. Not from soldiers standing in neat, disciplined lines. From the shadows. From the rubble. From every possible direction. Humans did not fight conventionally. They fought like something else. Like hunters. The Zaurek war machine was built on order and control. Human warfare was built on adaptation and chaos. The Zaurek commanders dismissed the battle as an anomaly, a lucky resistance effort. But then, it happened again and again. Every world they invaded, the same thing occurred. Humans never stood and fought. They vanished. They waited. And then, when the moment was right, they struck. One general tried to issue new orders, burn everything, destroy the planets. But it was too late, because humans had already learned how the Zaurek fought. And now they were fighting back. The Zaurek Dominion thought they had broken humanity. In reality, they had only forged them into something stronger. And now, the war had truly begun. The resistance, when the hunters became the hunted. The war should have ended months ago. That's what the Zaurek generals told themselves. By all logic, humanity should have crumbled. They lacked the fleet power, the technological superiority, the sheer numbers needed to withstand the might of the Dominion. And yet, despite their overwhelming strength, the Zaurek found themselves in a war they could not control. A war they did not understand. It started with missing patrols. Small squads of Zaurek soldiers would be deployed to pacified zones, searching for the last remnants of human resistance. They never returned. At first, the commanders assumed equipment failure, accidents, or miscommunication. Then they started finding the bodies. At least, what was left of them. Zaurek soldiers, once feared across the galaxy, were now being hunted. They were stripped of their weapons, their armor torn apart, their bodies left in ways that sent a clear message. You are not safe here. Entire bases vanished overnight. Ships landed, only to be greeted by silence. Then the first city collapsed. An occupied human world, filled with Zaurek forces, was suddenly cut off from communications. When reinforcements arrived, they found the city burning, not from an orbital bombardment, from within. Human saboteurs had spent weeks infiltrating their supply lines, poisoning their rations, setting traps in every corridor, in every street, in every building. By the time the Zaurek realized what was happening, their own fortress had become their grave. The survivors tried to escape. They didn't make it, because the humans had taken their own technology and turned it against them. A captured Zaurek officer, his body shaking, delivered a warning to his superiors that they don't fight like any species we've ever encountered. They're not just soldiers. They're ghosts. They're something else. The Zaurek thought they had invaded Earth. But now, the truth was clear. Humanity had invaded them. And the galaxy was beginning to notice. Because no one, not even the oldest, most advanced civilizations, had ever seen the Zaurek struggle before. And now they were losing. The fear spreads, the unstoppable force of humanity. Fear is not something the Zaurek Dominion understood. They had never needed to. For centuries, they had been the strongest, the most feared, the conquerors of worlds. But now something had changed. For the first time, their warlords hesitated before giving orders. For the first time, their troops questioned their own superiority. For the first time, they felt hunted. It wasn't just the battles. It wasn't just the missing patrols, the sabotaged bases, the warships that never returned from human space. It was the stories. Stories of Zaurek commanders who went to sleep in fortified bunkers and never woke up. Stories of entire planets that fell without a single human fleet appearing in orbit. Stories of species that did not die when they were killed. The Zaurek did not understand how humanity fought. They could not comprehend an enemy that refused to surrender, refused to accept defeat, refused to acknowledge the concept of losing. Because the Zaurek fought like an empire. Humans fought like something else, like survivors, like monsters born from 1,000 wars, like a species that had clawed its way up from extinction more times than they could count. Reports began to spread through the Dominion. A Zaurek fleet, one of the largest ever assembled, wiped out overnight. No distress signals, no survivors, no signs of an orbital battle. Just gone. Entire divisions of their finest soldiers, missing, their last transmissions filled with nothing but static and the sound of laughter. The laughter of men and women who already knew they had won. The Dominion tried to increase their forces. They tried to send more ships, more troops, more weapons. It didn't matter, because humanity was learning. Every battle, every skirmish, every ambush, humans adapted. They changed tactics before the Zaurek could react. They turned the enemy's own strategies against them. They turned their own technology against them. For the first time in history, the Zaurek Dominion was no longer winning, and the rest of the galaxy had taken notice. The species that had once dismissed humanity as weak were now watching with silent horror. Because if the humans could do this to the Zaurek, if they could break an empire that had never been broken, then what else were they capable of? The war was no longer about conquest. It was about survival. Because the Zaurek had made a terrible mistake. They had started a war with humanity. And now the only way out was death. The last stand, the end of the Zaurek Dominion. The Zaurek were desperate. They had conquered worlds beyond counting. They had burned civilizations to ash. They had never lost a war. Until now. Until humanity. The war had dragged on for far longer than anyone predicted. What should have been an easy conquest had become a nightmare. Entire Zaurek fleets had vanished. Their strongest warlords had fallen. Their once mighty armies had been torn apart from the inside. There was only one option left. A final battle. A last, desperate attempt to crush humanity before it was too late. Every remaining warship was called back. Every soldier, every war machine, every remaining fragment of the Dominion's once great power was assembled. The target? Earth itself. The strategy was simple. End the war in a single strike. If they could destroy humanity's homeworld, they could still claim victory. They could erase this mistake. And so, the largest fleet in Zaurek history, thousands of warships carrying millions of soldiers, descended upon Sol. For a brief moment, the Dominion felt hope. A battle this massive could not be won by guerrilla tactics. The humans could not hide. They could not sabotage. This was a direct fight. A fight the Zaurek believed they could finally win. They were wrong, because what waited for them in Sol was something they had never seen before. Not a broken, desperate species. Not a people clinging to survival. No, what awaited them was a force unlike anything the galaxy had ever known. The human fleet was smaller, outnumbered 10 to 1. But it didn't matter, because humans did not fight for numbers. They fought for destruction. The moment the battle began, the Dominion realized its mistake. Human warships were not sleek, elegant crafts designed for tactical precision. They were brutal engines of war, built to withstand fire, built to keep moving, built to kill. And their pilots? They fought like they had nothing to lose, because that's what made humanity terrifying. They did not fight for glory. They did not fight for power. They fought because they refused to be defeated. The battle became a slaughter. Human ships tore through Zaurek formations with a speed and brutality that defied all logic. Outnumbered, outgunned. It didn't matter. They adapted. They overwhelmed. They refused to break. Zaurek commanders issued frantic orders. Retreat. Regroup. Anything. But the orders never made it through, because the humans had already dismantled their communications. This was not just a battle. This was a message. A lesson burned into the void for every species to witness. This is what happens when you try to break us. The Zaurek Dominion ceased to exist that day, not because their fleets had been destroyed, not because their homeworld fell, but because their will had been shattered. No empire, no matter how powerful, could survive without the belief in its own strength. And the Zaurek had learned the ultimate truth. They were never the strongest. They had only existed because they had never faced something worse. And humanity was worse. The aftermath. A galaxy forever changed. It was over. The Zaurek Dominion, the once mighty empire that had ruled with an iron fist, was gone. Not just defeated, not just conquered, erased. Their fleets were gone. Their armies scattered. Their leaders hunted down one by one. The few who remained did not fight, because fighting humanity meant death. Not the swift death of battle. Not the honorable surrender of warriors. No, it was the kind of death that came with silence, with shadows moving through the wreckage of their broken empire, with whispers of a species that did not forgive and did not forget. The galaxy watched in horrified silence. Because something had happened that had never happened before. A dominant empire had fallen, not to another great power, not to some ancient, unstoppable force, but to humans. The species that had been called weak. The species that had been dismissed. The species that had become the greatest terror the universe had ever seen. The Galactic Council convened in emergency meetings. The surviving empires, once content to ignore Earth, now whispered among themselves. What do we do? How do we contain them? What if they turn their sights on us next? The answer was simple. They could not contain humanity. They could not control them. And they could never, ever afford to make the same mistake the Zaurek had made. Humanity had not just won a war. They had sent a warning. To the empires still watching. To the species still deciding whether Earth was worth respecting. To the enemies still lurking in the dark, wondering if they should try their luck. If you come for us, we will come for you. It was not a threat. It was a promise. Because humans did not fight for conquest. They did not fight for power. They fought for one reason, and one reason alone. To end the war. And when they fought, they did not stop until their enemies were nothing but dust.